The boy simply participated in the weapon selection ceremony and left the family elders completely astonished. This was simply because he managed to make all the family's sanctuary-grade weapons resonate. Even weapons that already had owners reacted to him. You have to understand that achieving resonance with a single sanctuary-grade weapon already marks someone as a genius among thousands. So what kind of prodigy must this boy be to earn the recognition of all the weapons? Although he originally intended to gain everyone's recognition, fate played a cruel joke on him. He was diagnosed with anomalous meridians, doomed to be unable to practice magic. No matter how hard he tried, at most he could reach the 9th level of a warrior, which was absolutely fatal. In a martial family that revered strength, his selection by the Holy Sword was also considered an accident. But despite everything, Lee never gave up. He trained desperately to prove the doctors wrong, finally managing to reach the 7th level of a warrior at 25 years old. Although this was a level his other siblings had reached before coming of age, he still felt happy. However, the happiness was short-lived, as he was expelled from the family at the age of 30. That was already the best possible outcome for Lee, because without his older brother's help, he wouldn't have kept his life. Since then, Lee spent 10 years in exile. These were chaotic times. The unexplored regions were expanding and monster invasions were frequent, but something even more momentous occurred. The death of Lee's father, who was considered the pinnacle of martial arts. He was also found by the Shadowblade Squad, a unit directly under the sect master. Lee asked how they had found him, but they completely ignored him, handing him an envelope and saying that this was his mission. Lee sighed helplessly. This damned bloodline will follow me to my death. In the letter, Lee learned that his third brother, Legion Sang, had become the head of the family, but what happened to his older brother? The captain of the Shadowblade Squad turned around and told Lee to meet them in 1 hour. Lee coldly asked what happened to his older brother, but the question was ignored again. He insisted, "I'm a 7th level warrior who hasn't wielded a sword in 10 years. Why send me to explore uncharted territories?" The captain turned back with a sinister expression. "Are you refusing the mission?" Having no reason to refuse meant death, so Lee had no choice but to accept. 1 hour later, Lee followed the Shadowblade Squad to a desolate building. Other clan members accompanied him. As soon as they entered the main door, what they found were enormous bones of monsters and remains scattered on the ground. However, before they could understand the situation, the squad members made their move. They began to massacre everyone. Lee pierced one of them with his sword and asked, "Who is behind this?" That man grabbed the blade and replied, "We were ordered to bring you here and eliminate everyone as efficiently as possible." After saying that, he crushed the blade with his bare hands. Immediately after, his wounds began to heal. Lee was kicked by the man, and that single blow left him unable to fight, but he didn't give up. He desperately looked for a weapon. Finally, he saw a sword embedded in the monster's skeletal jaw. That was the sword that had killed it. Although it was covered in rust, it should still be usable. Lee grabbed the iron sword, but it began to disintegrate, and his enemy had already gotten behind him, striking him with a merciless blow from his sword. Lee fell to the ground helplessly. "I'm going to die like this. I tried so hard to survive. If only I could live again." After an indeterminate amount of time, Lee began to regain consciousness. The first thing he heard was his father's voice, and when he opened his eyes, he saw that his father looked very young, even the butler, who looked rejuvenated, and his own hands were those of a baby. "What's happening? Have I been reborn?" His father, Latane, gave instructions to the butler Kai, assign him a maid and some members of the Shadowblade Squad as bodyguards. Just like the other children, have him participate in the weapon selection ceremony along with my 8th child. Moments later, both of them left the room. Lee breathed a sigh of relief, even though it had been a long time since he had seen his father. His imposing presence was still just as strong. He moved his arms cautiously. What exactly is happening? Recalling his father's words, he confirmed that he had indeed participated in the awakening ceremony with his 8th sister in his previous life. Although he struggled to believe it, it seemed he had really returned to that cursed past. Several months went by like this, and the most special day for the Lee family arrived. The weapon selection ceremony, where the children demonstrated their talent based on the weapon they chose. His father was chosen by dozens of swords, becoming the strongest swordsman of his generation. His older brother was chosen by a sword, a magic book, and a staff, making him famous for his mastery of both magic and swordsmanship. And today, Lee would participate in that very same ceremony. A maid stood in front of Lee, smiling. "Our young master looks so handsome, he doesn't even cry. In an unfamiliar environment, he's so serene." The maid hugged Lee. "I believe you will achieve great things." Mon cared for Lee like a mother, but because of his other siblings, she was dismissed. She was the only one who stayed by his side, crying for Lee's loneliness. Lee swore he would not let that happen, that he would protect Mon at all costs. Moments later, the ceremony began. The people in the venue were murmuring about Lee. "That bastard is going to participate in the selection ceremony." The head of the family, Lee Tai-yoon, walked to the center and announced the start of the ceremony. The eighth child, Yue, would go first. Litain took Yue's hand and cut her finger with a knife. Yue cried as her blood dripped to the floor. The ancient sword in the innermost position emitted a brilliant light. It was the ivory sword, a first-tier sacred relic, a legendary blade among legends that had not responded in generations. Litain drew the ivory sword to his hand. From that moment on, the ivory sword belonged to Yue. Someone began to congratulate the first lady of the family, Li Baiyan. Another genius had been born into the family. Li Baiyan nodded in approval. Then it was Li's turn. The people in the venue commented on how a bastard could participate in the ceremony. Litain brought Li forward, and although his finger was cut with the knife, Li did not cry. Seeing that, Litain patted his head and praised him. Truly admirable. Li felt a little nervous. In his previous life, he was chosen by the sword called Heavenly Sound, known as Insan. Would it be different this time? The boy simply participated in the weapon selection ceremony and left, completely stunning the family elders because he managed to make all the weapons resonate. Sanctuary-grade weapons of the family, even those that already had owners, reacted to him. You have to understand that achieving resonance with a single sanctuary-grade weapon already marks someone as a 1 in 1,000 genius, so what kind of prodigy must this boy be to earn the recognition of all the weapons? The family head called for silence from everyone present and then announced loudly, according to family rules, all weapons that resonate must belong to this person. But doing that is obviously impossible. I want to hear your opinions. Someone raised their hand to speak. Even if giving him these weapons complies with the family's rules, it violates the meaning of the weapon selection ceremony. This is a ritual that must be passed down through generations. How about we let him choose just one weapon? The family head Liatan immediately accepted the man's suggestion. Then Liatan arranged the weapons in front of Li. Now my son, choose the weapon you like. Although Li wasn't sure why the results this time were different from his previous life. The current situation was better for Li, so it would undoubtedly change the fate of his past life. Li continued to crawl inward, ignoring one divine artifact-level weapon after another until he arrived in front of a sword with an imposing presence. This sword, named Knight, was discovered by the first head of the Li clan in unexplored territories, a weapon full of mystery. No one knew how to use this sword's hidden power, and its known abilities weren't enough to classify it as a sanctuary-grade weapon. It was placed in the collection of sanctuary-grade weapons only out of respect for the first family head. This sword hadn't chosen a wielder in hundreds of years. Was this just a meaningless choice made by an infant, or was it another form of divine will? The family head lifted Li, then raised the sword Knight and declared, he has chosen the Black Dusk. The ceremony is over. The first wife up high looked at Li with a grim expression. This insignificant bastard, if he interferes with us, will have no choice but to eliminate him. 9 years passed just like that. That day, Li went to the training grounds to practice as usual. But a worried Mon insisted on accompanying him to see him off. On the way, Mon asked, the other fields are empty. Why must you go to training ground number 1? Besides, that field isn't spacious. Li indicated that someone was waiting for him at training ground number 1. Just then, they heard the sounds of training. Li looked at the person inside and said nonchalantly, is that father's 8th daughter? Mon quickly said, young master, you should call her sister. If others hear us, we'll be in trouble, no matter how. Leah swung her sword. Her instructor kept saying she wasn't qualified. Leah, furious, threw her sword to the ground and started throwing a tantrum. The instructor humbly tried to console her. Lee asked Mon who that person with such a difficult job was, and she replied, that's the commander of the Black Altar Squad, Vixian. Lee commented nonchalantly, he's too rigid, he can't teach a 9-year-old girl. Mon looked at Lee with some guilt, then comforted him. Soon there will be an excellent master who appreciates the young master's talent. I'm so sorry for not being able to take good care of you due to my incompetence. Miss Yue has been eating nutritious food since childhood and replied seriously, you're starting again. I always tell you I'm grateful for everything you do. I don't want to be like her. Everyone comes because of the Lee family's reputation, and I already have a good master. A few moments later, Lee arrived at training ground number 1. This place symbolized the glorious history of the Lee clan. It now seemed more like a symbolic area than a functional training ground, but Lee had come for a reason. Compared to the other grounds, the weapons stored there were mostly ancient, and he found a sword on the verge of breaking in the armory. After his rebirth, Lee discovered he had a special ability. He could read the memories of weapons. The older the weapon, the more memories it held. As he gripped the old sword tightly, scene after scene from its memories flooded Lee's mind. Following these memories, Lee continuously swung the iron sword, successfully completing an entire set of the 7-star sword technique. After 2 years of training, he had finally mastered it completely. Just then, applause rang out. I haven't seen such a perfect 7-star sword technique in a long time. A man walked in. It was Lee's uncle, a level 4 martial artist, the Grand Master of the Lee clan, Lee Ting. Although he was the son of a concubine, his strength was recognized, and he currently served as a general. Whether in his past life or this one, he was one of the few family members who truly cared for Li. Li bowed to greet his uncle Li Ting. He patted his head, signaling that he didn't need to be so formal, then smiled at him. "I'm proud that you come to the training grounds every day. I get to see you after work. Being discriminated against by your siblings must be difficult, but I hope you can overcome it." Li replied indifferently, "Uncle, I'm fine. It doesn't matter. I am still of the Li family bloodline. I will prove my worth with my sword. I know that is the way of our clan. So I will prove myself with my own strength." Li Ting was shocked by Li's words, then sighed. Why did this child have to be a bastard? Then he said, "You're almost old enough to participate in the destiny ceremony, though it's already a bit late. I'm willing to be your master before that ceremony. What do you say? Are you happy?" But Li shook his head. Li Ting asked in disbelief, "You're not satisfied with having me as your master?" Li waved his hand. "No. There's a rule about not having a master before the destiny ceremony. I don't want to put you in a difficult situation. My brothers openly violate all the rules. They receive training from grandmasters and eat supplements from a young age." Li took Li Ting's hand and said, "I believe that rules shouldn't be broken even if others do. Like I said before, I want to earn recognition with my own strength." Li Ting was astonished. Is this really just a 9-year-old boy? Those eyes are like when I look at my older brother, he thought to himself. It seems I can't change your decision. You're as stubborn as your father, and that's a problem. So your uncle can't do anything for you. I can't do anything. That worries me a lot. Do you need anything else? Li's eyes immediately lit up. I was waiting for you to say that. Li scratched his head. To be honest, there is something I do need your help with. Li Ting said happily, "Tell me what it is." Li smiled and said, "I want to visit the secret vault." Li Ting accepted his request, and Li followed Li Ting to the secret vault. It was said that countless divine artifacts were kept there. Li was very excited. What he was looking for was there. Li Ting told him that the vault's basement was where weapons sealed for various reasons were stored. Li, acting like an excited child, said innocently, "I heard that some monstrous weapons devour their own wielders." Li Ting smiled and nodded, then said in an ominous tone, "As long as you hold those weapons, they will devour your heart and your body. Are you scared?" Li said, lacking confidence, "I'm not scared." Moments later, the elevator reached the basement. Li Ting let Li explore the inside while he attended to other matters. After Li Ting left, Li exhaled, pretending to be a kid is really exhausting. The secret vault's basement was called the Tomb of Weapons, where countless weapons and relics were sealed. I've come all this way to find that mysterious weapon, the dagger named Wujun. By just injecting it with magical power, it could transform into various weapons at will. In his previous life, his third brother, Li Jun Sen, obtained that weapon. With Wujun's ability, he earned the title of the Shapeshifter, and that's how Li Jun became the clan leader. And after becoming the leader, he sent people to find and eliminate me. That's all I know. Now, to prevent that from happening again, I must obtain Wujun first. Black energy emerged from Li's hand. He then began to read the memories of the dagger-shaped weapons one by one, but after an hour, he still hadn't found it. However, Wujun had to be here. Just as Li was about to search more thoroughly, a rust-covered dagger was accidentally knocked to the ground. Li bent down to pick it up, but just as he was about to touch it, the energy from his hand was absorbed directly into the dagger. In an instant, black energy enveloped the dagger. Li's consciousness grew blurry. Then he found himself on a battlefield filled with mountains of corpses and seas of blood. This is the dagger's memory. Why is it different from when I read other weapons? Now it feels like I'm really present, so vivid. Just then, an extremely strong oppressive force hit him from behind. Li turned around and suddenly saw a monstrous, gigantic creature standing behind him. That monster was an ancient, apocalyptic demon that had emerged from black holes in ancient times. Li's legs trembled uncontrollably. I'm going to die. There's no way I can defeat a monster like this. I have to escape right now. Just then, a man covered in blood appeared behind Li. That person leaped into the air and executed an attack called Demon Piercer. The blow cut the monster in half with a single slash, and Li was stunned. How is it possible to defeat such a powerful monster in a single blow when the smoke cleared? That man was standing in front of him. Then the man turned his head toward Li and asked, "Who are you? Why are you here?" Li's heart shuddered. He can see me. Before he could regain his composure, the man raised his sword. "I'll let you die painlessly." After saying that, he launched a slash at Li the very next second. Li flinched and suddenly woke up. He had successfully returned to reality, but he couldn't stop shaking. What just happened? That oppressive and chilling sensation felt so real. Just then, the rust on the nearby dagger began to flake off. Li picked it up. Yes, this is it. It has to be. He cut his finger and let a drop of blood fall onto the dagger. Li was ecstatic. "I will become the king of 10,000 weapons, Bujin." Li's hand and the dagger emitted a brilliant glow. With a mental command, the dagger instantly transformed into a long sword. "I've finally found this divine artifact." Li gazed at the dagger with excitement. "This time I will become the king of 10,000 weapons." Li transformed Bujin into a ring and took it out of the secret vault. For the next 7 days, Li practiced daily the sword technique he had seen in Bujin's memory, but he wasn't successful. That man had only shown the technique and the name of the move, perhaps because he considered it was still too soon for Li to learn it. Setting aside its power just by watching his movements, you could feel the aesthetic beauty of the technique. Li couldn't replicate it at all, but that wasn't a problem, because now he had all the time in the world. In his past life, Li was useless, cast out from his family, unable to even learn the clan's basic martial arts. This was the first time he had ever experienced such a high-level martial technique. Li firmly believed he could master it. He clearly remembered every single one of that man's movements. Thinking about that, he suddenly realized something: the man's movements had been performed with an adult body. While he was just a 9-year-old boy, a child imitating an adult's movements naturally couldn't express the proper strength. Li understood that he had to adapt the technique to his own body. He closed his eyes and felt it out carefully. After gradually adjusting the technique, he executed a slash. That strike was truly powerful. Li was ecstatic he had grasped the key. Now all that was left was to solve the problem of using magic, but no matter how many times he tried the magical methods from his memories, they all failed. It seemed he had forgotten something important. Li sighed. He had no choice but to keep trying. He continued to swing his longsword, when suddenly someone grabbed his sword. Li was startled immediately. A woman holding his sword asked him, "Where did you learn that technique?" Li observed her black hair, brown eyes. She must be a direct descendant of the Li clan. Li asked who she was. The woman seemed surprised. "You don't know who I am." Then she clapped her hands, understanding. "It's normal that you don't recognize me. I hardly ever go out." Then she held out her hand and asked for his name. Li told her his name. The woman took his hand and shook it back and forth. "Your name is very special. Mine is Lijingwa." Lijingwa was his aunt. He had heard from his uncle that she was a very special person, but not well liked by others. Then Li was shaken by her. Lijingwa covered her mouth and said, "You're so fragile." Li was speechless. "Can't you consider that you're the one who's too strong?" Then, Lijingwa kept asking where he had learned that technique. Li asked her why she wanted to know. She replied, "What you used was an ancient martial art. I love ancient martial arts, that's why I'm asking. There were also ancient monsters in that era, you know." She took out a notebook and gave it to Li as a gift. Li examined it. Although he had a hard time understanding it, he could see that it was a technique for using magic. As he turned more pages, he discovered that it contained not just magic, but martial arts as well. All the techniques were advanced and difficult to comprehend. Maybe the rumors about his aunt aren't true. Li asked Li Jinghua what that last part was. She explained that it was ancient traditional style magic, based on magic pathways. In the past, magic pathways were used instead of magic circles. Nowadays, people store magic in their hearts and then release it, but is it really right to treat ancient magic as a mere relic? Li was surprised. He had never thought about that. Li Jinghua continued speaking in terms of magic usage. Perhaps that era was superior to the current one, which is why I'm researching ancient martial arts even though there are almost no records. After hearing that Li wanted to test his own ideas, he returned the notebook to Li Jinghua and asked her to wait, then took his sword and channeled magic. He let the magic disperse throughout his entire body instead of concentrating it in his heart. This was the magic channeling method that man used, and Li hadn't been able to understand. He executed a powerful slash, and this time the power was even greater than before. Even Li Jinghua was stunned. Li was ecstatic. "I finally did it." Li Jinghua, excited, grabbed his shoulders. "You used ancient martial arts, right?" "How did you do it?" Li replied, annoyed. "And why should I tell you?" Li Jinghua exclaimed in disbelief. "You figured it out just by looking at my notebook." "My livelihood depends on that. I've spent more than 10 years searching for how to use it. What do I have to do for you to tell me?" Li held up 3 fingers and said indifferently, "Accept 3 conditions. First, you won't talk about me to anyone without my permission. Not to my older brother and not to my father." Li Jinghua curiously asked why. Li replied that he didn't like people talking about him. She nodded with a complex expression. Li continued, "Second, you can't lie to me. We need mutual trust." Li Jinghua looked uncomfortable and thought for a moment, then she clenched her fist decisively. "All right, what's the last one?" For the past year, Li had been researching magic with his aunt every day. It was a new type of magic that combined modern magic based on magic circles with ancient magic based on pathways. That was Aunt Li Jinghua's lifelong dream, to accumulate magic, alter its properties using magic circles, and then control it through magic pathways. Thanks to this method, Li could use magic more effectively than his peers. That day, the maid Mon arrived, running to the training grounds with a letter for Li. He took the envelope and examined it. It was a summons for the appointment ceremony. Li noticed that the person in charge wasn't his father, but Li Minho acting as a representative. He found it strange, since he hadn't heard that his father would be away. Beside him, Li Jinghua suddenly shouted, "Are you going to participate in the appointment ceremony?" "Just when I finally understood the key points, I need your guidance more than ever." After that ceremony, you'll have to stay there, so don't go. Then Li Jinghua looked at him with a pleading expression. With no other choice, Li refused, then told her not to worry, although he would have less time. He would continue researching magic with her. Li Jinghua asked in disbelief, "Really, you'll be very busy with classes?" And he replied confidently, "I'll train in magic techniques and restore ancient magic at the same time." The next day, Li went to the training grounds for his class. Today's task was to withstand magic attacks for 30 minutes. The instructor was Captain Hansu of the Bloody Tiger Squad. Hansu originally thought that bastard Li wouldn't last more than 2.5 seconds before giving up. However, Li's performance left him shocked. He clearly perceived Li's intentions that Kid was testing his own limits by comparing himself to his 8th sister, Li Hua, to gauge his level. He was forcing us to give him more difficult courses, but he's barely 10 years old. He's a true monster. Seeing Li's talent, Hansu changed his way of thinking. He needed to reflect. Not just for the naming ceremony, he was going to train him with all his might. After the training, Li stretched, recalling the instructor's attitude. He didn't expect Hansu to apologize to him. His attitude had changed. Thinking about that, Li wanted to go rest, but suddenly Li Hua appeared and attacked him. Li Hua said coldly, "Hey bastard, we need to talk." Li broke free from Li Hua's grasp and asked what she wanted. She pointed at him furiously. "Talk to me with respect. I am a legitimate child and you are a bastard. Besides, I'm 1 year older than you." Li turned away impatiently. "I don't have time to deal with you." Hearing that, Li Hua became enraged and channeled magic while shouting, "Don't underestimate me." Li was a little surprised. Is she using magic? At first he thought about ignoring her, but he dodged her punch, grabbed her by the collar, and lifted her up, telling her coldly, "If you want to complain, go to your mother. I'm busy, don't bother me." After saying that, he let her go. As soon as he did, Li Hua shouted, "This is all your fault, all because of what you did at the weapon selection ceremony. They always compare me to you. Why can't you just hide your identity like the other bastards? It's not fair. I can't sleep at night. I don't even eat snacks. I train desperately every day while you're a natural genius. I don't want this either, but Mom..." At that point, Li Hua covered her mouth. Li, showing no emotion, replied, "Blaming others must feel great. Like you said, I'm just a bastard, so I have no one to blame. If you can't sleep, then don't sleep. If skipping snacks isn't enough to catch up to me, then stop eating altogether. If you hate me, do everything you can to surpass me. Then I will apologize to you. That's how this family works." Li Hua clenched her fists and shouted arrogantly, "I'm gonna surpass you at the naming ceremony and crush you. I'll make you beg me for forgiveness, remember that." Li laughed and nodded. "Good, I'll look forward to it." After parting ways with Li Hua went to the training grounds. The first lady of the Li family, Bayu Ian, arrived there. She had all the servants withdraw and then slowly entered the grounds. Bayu Ian asked Li Hua what she was doing. She stopped her movements and replied that she was training. Bayu Ian said coldly, "I heard how you lost. I told you to defeat your opponent. I am very disappointed. If you're only training to avoid being scolded, you'd better not do it at all. I don't even want to bother with you now." Li Hua looked up. "I'm training because I want to. No matter what, I will defeat him. But not because you ordered me to, but because I want to do it myself, so I will handle it on my own." Bayu Ian said in an ominous tone upon hearing that. "So you were inspired by that bastard." Li Hua didn't know what to say for a moment. Bayu Ian lifted her chin. "You are a legitimate daughter of the Li family. Your status was always different from his. It's only natural that you surpass him. And instead you're inspired by him." Bayu Ian took out a small bottle. "This is called Lost Dream. It's extremely poisonous. If you can't surpass him, then kill him. That's how things are done in this family. And he's just a bastard." It only took him 3 months to reach the first level of overall strength. Maid Mon hugged Leah in relief. Just then someone knocked on the door. Li Jinghua opened it and shouted, "Treasure, let's go train together." Leah reluctantly told her, "I just finished training." Li Jinghua, with her eyes closed, replied, "That's why you have to exercise. Using magic can relieve your fatigue." Leah said, speechless, "I've never heard anything like that." Li Jinghua, looking guilty, murmured, "It should be true." Leah shook his head. "Forget it. Let me show you something." Li Jinghua opened the grade sheet on the computer. "You've already reached the 1-star level. Modern magical arts require 3 stages. Body strengthening, the Chang realm, which alters the nature of magic, and the supernatural realm, which allows for supernatural abilities through magic. But Auntie's magic was different. Even in the first stage, he could demonstrate more abilities, so his magic was rated by stars." Li Jinghua sensed the magic inside Leah and said cheerfully, "Perfect, this is definitely 1 star. It was difficult to learn how to use the magic path. I thought it would take a year." Leah recalled with some fear, "I understood it in class, but looking back still scares me. I couldn't control the magic flow well and almost broke the balance between the magic circles and paths. You just need to let it flow naturally. Magic flows like water. Our bodies are vessels filled with magical energy." Li Jinghua continued her explanation. She sensed the magic and then said with joy, "Little one, I think I can do it too. Even if it takes time, I feel like I'll succeed." Leah sighed in relief. It seems Auntie has understood it. The next second, Lijingwa excitedly lifted Leah up. Thank you, my lucky charm, and he felt like his ribs were about to break. After letting him go, Lijingwa's eyes were shining. Perfect. Now let's move on to the 2-star stage. Do you know how your first stage differs from the normal one? Leah nodded. Aunt Lijingwa asked him what he thought he was best at. Leah thought and said, I think swordsmanship, but Lijingwa directly rejected his answer. Leah, confused, asked Auntie, didn't you see me practice my swordsmanship? She admitted that she did, but explained that he had skills far superior to that. Magic. His magical talent was unparalleled, making everything else seem insignificant. I have taught my magic to others, but no one has been able to learn it. Leah felt a certain melancholy realizing that in his past life he had been ridiculed for not being able to use magic, and he actually did have talent. Lijingwa pointed at him. That's why I say reaching the 2-star level won't be difficult for you. If you succeed, the naming ceremony will be a piece of cake. From now on, I will teach you the real techniques. Leah nodded and stood up, asking about what was next to her. Lijingwa slapped a box, and instantly, a strong gust grazed Leah's cheek and crashed into the wall behind him. Steel balls you have to move while releasing magic. Because using them without moving is dead magic. Let's begin. A cold sweat ran down Leah's back. The next day marked the beginning of the next stage of training for Leah and Lihua. The instructor introduced himself. I am Lee Chung-won, captain of the Bloody Lake Squad. From now on, I will teach you the secret arts of the Lee family. Go over there and choose the weapons you will use. You have 1 minute, don't waste time. Lihua glanced at Leah. He, annoyed, asked him, what are you looking at? Do you have something to say? Lihua hurried to clarify that he wasn't looking and that he had nothing to say. Then he asked, you use swords too, right? Then Leah shook his head. Then he took 2 swords and a spear. Lihua shouted in confusion, what, you clearly use swords when you train. Lee Chung-won naturally asked him what he was doing. Lee calmly replied, you didn't tell us which weapons to choose. I've already made my choice. Lee Chung-won said with disgust, I told you to bring the weapon you use. Lee replied that's exactly what he had done. Lee Chung-won muttered in frustration, I thought at least you weren't stupid, but I didn't expect you to be an idiot. Then Lee Chung-won unsheathed a long spear from his back. Remember what I'm about to say. I mentioned I would teach you the secret arts, but I won't be teaching you stances or techniques. In the Ali family, there are many secret arts called enlightenment. To learn them, you need a foundation awakening the 6th sense that sleeps within your bodies. I'm going to awaken your senses now, so don't be too scared. Before the two could understand what Lee Chung-won planned to do, he lunged at Lee and launched an attack, but Lee managed to block the blow. Lee Chung-won was a little surprised. Lee gritted his teeth, thinking to himself that he didn't expect to be doing this kind of crazy stuff again. Although he didn't receive this type of training in his past life, this life would be different. In the blink of an eye, Lee and his partner had been training for 1 month. During this time, they endured training, far beyond what any 10-year-old child could withstand. Every day they suffered various physical punishments from the instructor, but Lee gradually began to understand how to adapt. When Lihua woke up from her coma once again, Lee commented, This is the 22nd time you've fainted. I've only fainted 16 times. Lihua hastily protested, claiming she just wasn't ready. The instructor Lee Chung-won watched the 2 children. The legitimate heir, Lihua, had a resilient physique. Despite constantly attacking them, neither had suffered any serious injuries. Then there was the illegitimate son, Lee. From the first day, he sensed that this boy was no ordinary kid. At first, when he saw him take several weapons, he thought he was a fool. But to his surprise, he could handle them all with great skill. Lee Chung-won announced that the training would continue and for them to return to their positions. Once in place, Lee whispered to Lihua, In a moment, I'll give you a signal. Help me block him. Lihua asked why he wanted to do that. Lee replied indifferently, If you don't want to, then don't. I just think we could make a brilliant offensive move. Lihua agreed. She lunged at Lee Chung-won while shouting, You owe me one. Lee also charged forward. At Lee's current level, it was impossible to beat the instructor, so he had no choice but to use their numerical advantage to create an opportunity. Seeing them work together, Lee Chung-won commented calmly, A good move deciding to team up. Lee Chung-won tilted his head to dodge the long spear of Lee, then deflected his weapon with a single blow. Just as he was pouncing on Lee, Lee shouted, Now! Then he jumped back to dodge, and Lihua emerged from the side, managing to buy some time. Lee threw the spear. Currently, his most powerful attack was just the demon-piercing technique he had learned from Bujin. At that moment, Lihua had already been knocked down by Lee Chung-won. Lee gripped his sword and lunged at him. Lee Chung-won turned immediately, trying to block the sword, but Lee let go of his weapon, clenched his fist, and threw a direct punch. The punch landed hard. Lee smugly thought he had succeeded, but his fist was stopped by Lee Chung-won's palm. Immediately, he felt a metallic taste in his throat, and a wave of intense pain washed over him. He was brutally thrown against the wall. Lee Chung-won spoke after 37 days. Congratulations on awakening your sixth sense. After saying that, he stepped aside to dodge Li Hua. You're still too green. Li Hua couldn't stop her momentum and crashed into the wall. Furious, she shouted, I trusted you. How could your plan have failed? Li Chengwan looked at his palm. In fact, he had used magic to block the attack. Although it was a small amount that violated the rule of not using magic, that kid has exceptional combat perception. He will surely become the most feared member of the Li family. Li Hua awakened her sixth sense on the 47th day. The two of them graduated from Li Chengwan's tutelage, and Li spent the remaining time practicing and reviewing what he had learned. During that period, his older brother Li Minsen went to see him. Li Minsen was the eldest son of the Li family, and he had received the title of Twin Star for having reached the second level in both magic and martial arts. He was a formidable expert, admired and feared, but to Li, he was simply his brother. When they met, Li Minsen told him, You are my brother. And yet I haven't been able to look after you as I should. Although it may sound like an excuse, I've truly been very busy. Li replied that it was no problem. Li Minsen smiled. This is the first time we've met, but you knew who I was right away. Li replied, Of course. Even though I'm your half-brother, I couldn't possibly fail to recognize my older brother's face. Li Minsen said with displeasure, Don't talk like that. Even though we have different mothers, you and everyone else are my brothers all the same. Li scratched his head. I'm sorry. Li Minsen took a breath. You don't have to apologize, just knowing is enough, and don't be so formal. I'm your brother, Li nodded happily, thinking that his older brother was still as kind as he was in his youth. Li Minsen reached into his pocket. This is a gift for our first meeting. I got it at the Weifel Magic University abroad. It's a miraculous potion called nectar known as the Wine of the Gods. Li knew how valuable that item was, a top-tier magic potion. The country's magic tower F could only produce 50 milliliters a year. Li thanked him excitedly. Li Minsen commented in surprise, You're different. Until now, all my brothers have seen me as a rival. I'm glad you're different, though I'm not used to it, but Li denied it. You're mistaken. It's not that I refuse to see you as a rival. I'm also a member of the Li family, so don't treat me like your cute little brother. When I grow up, I might become your biggest competitor. It will be an exciting competition. Li Minsen stepped forward and patted his head with a smile. All right, I look forward to the day you become my greatest rival. Li thought to himself, Big brother, this time I will protect you. Finally, the long-awaited naming ceremony began. Li and his partner took a ship to the remote Scarlet Blue Island. The color of the land there changed depending on the magical power present in the environment. Since ancient times, that island had been the place where the Li family held its naming ceremonies. The person in charge on the ship explained the rules to the youth's young master and young lady. You must survive on this island for 3 weeks. You must prove your worth. We will now give you tracking devices. Do not remove them. The evaluation tribunal will open for 2 days at the end of the 3 weeks. Good luck to you both on reaching the island. Li Hua said to Li with hesitation, I have something to tell you. Li replied with annoyance. You finally decided. Li Hua, confused, asked why he said that, and Li calmly explained. You've wanted to tell me something since the beginning of our training, right? Li Hua asked in disbelief how he knew, and Li, with resignation, replied, How could I not know? Tell me what it is. Li Hua removed the camera from her chest and gestured for Li to do the same, and he put his in his pocket. Then Li Hua took out a bottle. It's a poison called Dream Mist. It only affects children under 15 years old. If it's exposed to the air for more than 5 minutes, it evaporates. Once ingested, it blocks the magic channels. Li asked grimly, Who gave it to you? Li Hua refused to say and threw the bottle into the sea. See, there's no evidence left now. I want to defeat you fair and square, not with the help of poison. So you have to give it your all in the exam too. He replied confidently that he would, even without her asking. As they parted ways, Li Hua warned him to wait and get used to the surroundings before heading to the center of the island because it was very dangerous. He told her he already knew. Are you worried about me or something? Li Hua first replied with disdain. Why would I be worried? But then her tone shifted. Yes, I'm worried you'll die before I can get my revenge. Remember, don't you die, I'm leaving. Having said that, she walked away, but Li had no intention of adapting to the outskirts. He went straight to the center of the island. Just as expected, Li Hua easily completed the first hunting task, killing many wild beasts. Even though it was her first real combat, the elder of the Yun family praised her without reservation. After all, Li Hua had awakened her sixth sense in just 47 days. However, only Li Chun knew that even though Li Hua was talented, that was her limit. It should have taken her at least 2 months, but she was forced to awaken early because of the pressure from Li. In contrast, Li Kun despised Li deeply, who instead of hunting beasts, was searching for hiding spots all over the island. He's running away like a mouse, what a coward, he commented disdainfully, but Limin interrupted him. That's enough. Seeking shelter first in a dangerous place is normal. There's nothing to mock. The others who had been agreeing with Li Kun awkwardly tried to correct themselves. But only Li Kun maintained his hostile tone. In a martial family, being normal is a sin, isn't it? Lin Insun clenched his fists. Yes, of course, for someone from a martial family, acting like a civilian is ridiculous. When did we stoop to mocking a child's background? Maybe we've always been this way. He wondered what his brother was thinking about Li heading to the island's center, and turning his head, he saw that Li Tain also looked anxious. Clearly, he wasn't the only one with these concerns. Meanwhile, Li finally found a decent cave. He covered it with banana leaves, took the camera off his wrist, and hid it under the leaves, causing the screen in the monitoring room to go black. Li Chun burst out laughing when he saw that, as unpredictable as ever. Now Li could use Bujin without any worries. Since he was here, he had to make the most of it. He looked at the strange liquid in the bowl, which was almost gone, but its appearance was unsettling. No one would ever think it was a spiritual medicine made from magic herbs. In his previous life, Li couldn't even afford the most basic ones because he had no money. But fortunately, he had learned to prepare them by accident. His aunt Ligan Yua had told him that on the Blue Scarlet Island, many herbs that increased magical power grew. So he had to increase his mana before returning, even though the liquid made him nauseous. He drank it all in one gulp. That deadly taste would be etched into his memory forever. The 3-week survival battle had officially begun. 18 days passed when suddenly, a magic circle appeared in a corner of the island. Space tore open with a crackle and a man emerged with a single purpose: to assassinate Li, the illegitimate son of the Li family. Meanwhile, Li had already reached the center of the island where he encountered a Draco, a 7th-level dragon-type magical creature. The Draco backed away to gather power and exhaled flames of extremely high temperature. Li focused intensely and, 1 second before they reached him, turned his head to dodge. Then he lunged toward the front of the creature. He jumped into the sky, gathered magic in his hand, and executed his Demon Piercer technique, plunging the sword into the Draco's skull, killing it in a single blow. As he wiped away his sweat, he thought, dragons are something else. If I had faced one on my first day here, I wouldn't have withstood a single attack. It had taken him 19 days to reach the Dragon Zone, but there was another reason he had traveled so far. Suddenly, Li sensed something unusual and hid. Moments later, several lizard men appeared, 8th-level magical creatures. He had already noticed their presence the day before. The lizard men usually lived on the outskirts, but instead of attacking him, they seemed to want to guide him somewhere. Although they had low intelligence, they were clearly being controlled. Li decided to check it out, came out of his hiding spot, and sure enough, the lizard men fled. After killing several, he confirmed his suspicion. Once could be a coincidence, but twice was not. He decided to follow them to find out what was happening. On the other side, the mysterious man observed the actions of Li with contempt. A child, after all, fell right into the trap. The man was a beast tamer named 11. He confidently petted his pet he wouldn't even need his plan B. However, unbeknownst to him, Li was watching him from a nearby tree. He had already deduced it was a trap. What he didn't understand was how outsiders had entered the island, although it wasn't impossible if a teleportation array existed. That meant someone from the Li family was involved. He should inform the family and wait for reinforcements. But the next second, he discarded that idea. By the time they arrived, it would be too late, and the mastermind behind it all would have escaped. There was only one option left: capture him himself. He used an invisibility technique and lunged toward 11. Luckily, the pigeon that 11 had as a pet sensed the danger and sounded an alert. 11 turned around, terrified. Li, while invisible, hadn't expected him to have a warning pet. 11 brandished his magic wand to block the lethal attack. "You're more skilled than I imagined," said 11. "You're too weak," Li scoffed. 11, furious, had the lizard men attack. Li channeled magic to use the 3rd form of the 7-star sword, eliminating several of them instantly, but just as he was about to attack 11, several iron chains bound him, leaving him immobilized. 11 shouted triumphantly, "You fell for the trap. This is a top-level formation that can sever the magic circles of up to 5 people. Now you're just an ordinary kid with no magical power." "Die," 11 said coldly as several lizard men approached the immobilized Li with blades. But Li remained calm. "Sever magic circles. Then I'll just use magic roots." The next instant, Li shattered the chains using impact force, and in the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of 11. "Where do you think you're going?" asked 11. Stunned. He wondered how Li had escaped the formation, but Li said there was no need to explain as he had already transmitted his image to the family. Using the camera, "Surrender without a fight," he ordered. 11 let out an icy laugh. "It doesn't matter, I'll kill you and regain my freedom." Before Li could react, something huge slammed into his body. He was thrown by the brutal force and crashed into a tree, feeling as if his internal organs were about to rupture. Looking into the distance, he saw a giant turtle. It was the guardian beast of Azure Scarlet Island, the Turtle Mountain, a 3rd-level nightmare-class creature. 11 smiled proudly. "Although I don't control it completely yet, it will carry out the order to kill you. Give up and die." Li forced himself to remain calm. If he couldn't completely control the Turtle Mountain, then he just had to eliminate 11. He took out a pill. It was a forbidden drug with severe side effects, the Magic Fury pill. He unsheathed Gujin and decided to use the technique his aunt had taught him, reserved only for extreme situations. This was the moment. Tianzu's immense magic filled his body and he leaped into the air, swinging his sword with all his might. Although the blow didn't even scratch the turtle's skin, it had an effect. "I'll use this to finish you," he thought as the turtle roared at the sky, making him tremble with fear and unable to move. At that moment, a black energy surged from his chest and enveloped his body, resisting the beast's roar. Lee no longer hesitated. He rushed towards the Turtle Mountain magic overflowing from his sword and unleashed his strongest attack, Demon Piercer. The impact snapped the turtle's head up, firing a magic beam capable of destroying cities into the sky. Lee spat out blood and fell to his knees. He only had 10 seconds left before the side effects would leave him in a state of extreme weakness. He had to find and eliminate 11 in that time. Suddenly, a red line appeared, guiding him. Following it, he found 11. Only 3 seconds remained. 11 didn't expect Lee to find him so quickly. Before he could react, Lee's sword was already in front of him. But it wasn't long enough. "Then I'll make it a little longer," and he swung it again, piercing 11's chest. In the final second, he had succeeded. Then he pulled from his chest a small bottle. His aunt had told him to drink it after using the forbidden technique. It was precisely the nectar that his older brother Lemon had given him, but in the next second. Lee's vision went black and he lost consciousness. In his unconscious state, he found himself surrounded by a white void. Before he could even think, a severe pain shot through him. Then he heard a voice. "So it has come to this. Those things are too dangerous for humans. Hello, how can they coexist in a single body? I hope you don't wake up, but for now, eat this." An object fell in front of Lee. He recognized that thing, a purple honeycomb. "Could it be the purple cloud green jade?" The voice continued. "It's not for you, but for him. A new era has begun. Be strong, child, or you will be devoured by it." That was the last sentence he heard before losing consciousness again. Sometime later, Li Jua's voice pulled him from his stupor. "Are you conscious?" Li answered weakly. "Li Jua," she exclaimed, "annoyed you, rascal, calling your sister by her name just like that. I'll forgive you since you're hurt. How's your body?" Li closed his eyes and assessed it. Despite having a damaged skeleton, his magical power had increased considerably. He had really eaten the purple cloud green jade. He said calmly, "I just have some internal damage, a few broken bones and torn muscles, nothing serious." Li Jua shouted in horror, "You call that nothing serious?" Li looked at her, thinking that originally that medicine was meant for her. Purple cloud green jade was a spiritual medicine that strengthened the body, increased mana, and provided immunity against poisons and curses. Although he had always planned to get it, he felt a little guilty. He stood up and asked, more importantly, "How did you get here?" Just then a voice interrupted you two. It was his older brother Li Minzen who ran towards him. "How's your body? You need to get treatment first. I also brought some magic potions." Li waved his hand, "Thanks, but I don't need magical treatment. I'll just drink the potion." He drank the nectar in one gulp, then Li Minzen asked Li Jua to let them speak alone. "If you had died, I would have destroyed every organization related to that beast tamer, no matter how powerful they are. As a member of the family, your performance was exemplary as a warrior, but as your brother, I can't praise you. You were too reckless." Li scratched his head. "I didn't expect the Turtle Mountain to appear. If I had known, I would have waited for reinforcements." Li Minzen sighed. "At least you can tell the difference between confidence and recklessness." Li replied, "I subjugated the beast tamer, so I have the right to know his information." Li Minzen rubbed his forehead, resigned. "I knew you'd say that. That tamer was a near martial level sorcerer from the Anioji group in Japan. Expelled for trying to acquire forbidden arts? It seems he used advanced forbidden magic while the turtle was sleeping. They wanted to blame the monster for your death." Li pondered. "Haven't they found out who was behind it yet?" Li Minzen said the tamer was barely surviving, so it was difficult to get information out of him. Hearing that Li declared the target wasn't me, but you, brother. Li Minzen asked, confused why he thought that. Li explained, "Because you didn't detect the intruder, they wanted to tarnish your reputation." Li Minzen scratched his head. "You're right about that. I can't even pretend otherwise." Then he patted his head. "My reputation being damaged is no big deal. But I can't stay much longer. I have to go back." Li grabbed his hand. "Brother, how about we make a deal? You predicted the infiltration and told me in advance. I'll testify to that, and then everyone will believe you anticipated what not even the intelligence department could detect." Li Minzen replied, "But telling the truth would be better for you." Li said calmly, "If they knew I accomplished such a feat, they would be even more wary of me." Li Minzen understood a deal is about giving what the other needs. "What do you want?" Li responded that he only needed to spend 3 days in the Golden Pavilion. Lemon squeezed his hand in gratitude, but Li replied calmly, "That's not necessary. After all, this is a deal." Laneson patted Li on the shoulder. "Even without me, you would have found a way to solve this, wouldn't you?" Just then, Laneson's phone rang. "It seems I really must go." After speaking, he tossed something to Li. "I'll keep quiet about that matter." Li caught it and saw that it was Wu Jin, truly an extraordinary brother. Moments later, Li Jua returned and asked Li which trial room he was going to challenge next, as they should be open by now. Li answered her with another question. "And you, which one are you going to challenge?" Li Jua, annoyed, replied, "I asked first." Li indicated that if she wanted to know, she had to answer first. She said confidently, "Naturally, I'm going to challenge the most difficult room, the Chamber of Obsession. And you?" Li replied calmly, "The Chamber of Conflict." Li Jua asked in disbelief, "Aren't you going to the trial room on the outskirts?" Li nodded, confirming. She looked at him with disappointment. "You've greatly disappointed me. It seems I overestimated you. There's no need to talk anymore." Li believed that Li Chua was stronger than him. The trial rooms had different difficulty levels based on their location. She was disappointed because he chose a peripheral room. Let her think what she wants. Li made his way through the forest to a hidden cave that he had discovered in his previous life. There, he would complete the second stage of the naming ceremony, the Chamber of Conflict. He lit a torch and illuminated a stone wall. It wasn't just any wall. Li summoned Wu Jin and attacked the surface. The stones shattered, revealing a tightly sealed bronze door. What he was looking for was not a common trial room, but a secret realm left by the family's ancestors. Li cut his palm and sprinkled blood on the door. It opened slowly. He walked to the altar in the center and let his blood drop. Onto it, a descendant of the Li family wishes to challenge the trial of conflict. Grant him entry. The content of the trial had only one requirement: to defeat himself in combat. The attempts were unlimited. Li swore not to leave until he achieved victory, but as soon as the challenge began, the phantom decapitated him. Li sat up abruptly, clutching his neck. The sensation had been incredibly real. That intensity would be enough to drive anyone mad. He observed the trial phantom, wondering if he could ever reach that level. The phantom could use 100% of Li's abilities. The current Li was far from unleashing his full potential. If he could draw out that hidden power, he could avoid that blow. Let's continue. Just as expected. On the third attempt, he was pierced through the abdomen and died. On the fifth, although he blocked the phantom's sword, his neck was twisted. He kept trying, relentlessly dying over and over again. Finally, on the 80th attempt, he found his rhythm and understood his advantage. The freedom of infinite transformation, overwhelming adaptability, and unpredictable freedom. He transformed his weapon into a spear. Clash after clash, the movements of both combatants synchronized. The phantom retreated and turned its weapon into a longsword that pierced Li's abdomen, but he grabbed its arm with one hand and exclaimed, excitedly, "Fool, I left that opening on purpose, Demon Slayer." It descended from above and pierced the phantom, which began to disintegrate as he passed the trial. The hidden power of the Li family's bloodline activated. In his past life, Li had only obtained a common skill enhancement, but this time was different. A golden energy enveloped him. What is this skill? Meanwhile, outside the secret realm, his uncle Li Time was waiting anxiously. Since Li hadn't come out at the agreed-upon time, Time was getting frustrated, wondering how much chaos that kid would cause at the ceremony. Suddenly, he felt magical fluctuations and Li's figure materialized. He was about to collapse, so Li Time rushed to support him, asking if he was okay and telling him to hang in there. Li weakly replied that it was manageable, but he needed food and water because he was starving. Li Time sighed in relief and then roared, "You reckless kid." Back at his residence, an emotional Mon hugged Li. "Do you know how worried I was, first a beast tamer, then the ancestral trial? I was planning to give you a serious scolding, but welcome home, young master." Li nodded in thanks. After letting him go, Mon told him that his bath water was ready and dinner would be served when he was done. Li took the towel and asked about his aunt, as he expected her to be the first one to come out and greet him. However, Mon gave him some bad news. His aunt was imprisoned in the dungeon. When he got there, Legina greeted him cheerfully. "My dear, how wonderful to see you safe and sound, but more importantly, what did you do to increase your magical power so drastically? You can't even absorb it all. Sit down right now and practice with me." Li interrupted her, and Legina scratched her head, looking awkward. The reason she was locked up was that she had caused a scene in the control room after learning about the assassination attempt on Li. She became enraged, believing it was the work of the family's top brass, and started cursing out the elders and her older brother. Legina lowered her voice. "I'm sorry, I thought they had done something strange to you. I couldn't control my anger at that moment. I was devastated, thinking I would never see you again. It felt like my throat was closing up." Li had never fully trusted Legina, but at some point he had come to consider her family. He exhaled deeply and said, "Well, it's time to accept it." Then he turned and said, "I'll be able to get you out soon, just wait a little longer." Legina waved her hand. "It's okay, don't push yourself." Li replied confidently, "I have a plan, you'll be out soon." When night fell, Li and his group were waiting at the airport. The family head Li Ting disembarked from the plane. Seeing him, Li felt he had matured a lot during the ceremony, but he still couldn't gauge the distance between himself and his father. Li Ting noticed his son's sharp gaze, which left him somewhat incredulous. "I always say that those who don't strive have no place in this family," he said nonchalantly. "However, there is only one person here with a competitive spirit against me." This perplexed Li and Li Jua. Who was he referring to? His older brother? He then understood that even though he thought he was hiding his emotions well, his father had seen right through him. Moments later, in the grand hall of the family banquet, since the naming ceremony was an extremely important event for the Lees, a lavish feast was being held with countless prominent figures. Just then, the butler found Li in a corner and told him the family head was looking for him. Li followed him uneasily, hoping it was nothing serious. Upon arriving outside, he discovered that his older brother was already there with his father, Li Ting. Li guessed what this was all about. He said indifferently, "I'm here to talk about what happened during the naming ceremony. According to Min, he discovered intruders and then ordered you to capture them. Was this all your idea?" Li thought they had indeed found out. Realizing he couldn't avoid it, he straightened his posture and said, "That's right, it was all my plan. The condition was to have access to the treasure pavilion for 3 days and to not be implicated in the incident." Li Teking, showing no emotion, said, "Considering your contribution to this matter, I will forgive your false report, but there won't be a next time." Li bowed and said, "I understand. However, Minson will be punished in your place. This reception is your responsibility, so go back now." Insena nodded, then smiled at Li and left. Li got a little worried. Would his older brother be okay? Li Teking continued, "Besides lying to me, this achievement was clearly yours, and you will receive the reward that Minson promised you. Finally, since you passed the trial of conflict, I will grant you a reward of your choice." After returning to the banquet, Li Teking raised his voice from the head seat. "I thank our friends who have traveled from afar, and may blessings be upon these 2 children. Now I will begin the naming ceremony. 8th daughter Lihua, step forward. You who were chosen by the Holy Sword, may you always illuminate your surroundings with a brilliant aura, a symbol of your unwavering commitment on the path of light. From this day forward, you shall be called Rui Swan." Lihua thanked him cheerfully. "Now 9th son Li, step forward. You are strong, yet sharp, gentle, without bending, like a blacksmith who forges iron into a solid piece. You have tempered yourself. No word better describes your nature. You shall be called Iron." This ceremony was meant for Li to live as strong as iron. However, that no longer meant anything to him. "I will not stop until I reach the top. My name is Li." At that moment, Legina in her cell had nearly gone insane. She shook the prison door frantically, cursing without end. The guards were powerless against her screams. Just then, a nearby phone rang. The guard quickly opened the cell and said, "You can leave." Legina ran out excitedly. As she was leaving, a voice called out to her. It was Li. Legina asked him, in disbelief, if he had really rescued her. Li nodded, then handed her an envelope. As she opened it, Li said calmly, "Aunt, you owe me a favor." The contents of the envelope was her appointment as an elder. She would be the instructor for the 9th son, Li. Li extended his hand and said, "Please take care of me, master." 3 years passed just like that. Li, now 13 years old, was about to participate in the family's training. His life as a trainee was about to begin. When he arrived at the training grounds, he caused quite a stir, though most of the comments were jeers. They laughed at him, saying he had just gotten lucky and wondering what kind of skills an illegitimate son could have. Li felt extremely irritated. All this talk about him being an illegitimate son bothered him deeply. Just then, the legitimate daughter, Li Ruiswan, appeared. Everyone on the training grounds immediately praised her, creating a stark contrast with Li. Li Wan quietly approached to greet him. Li nodded, acknowledging it had been a while. Li Wan said, somewhat embarrassed, "I hope you didn't take what happened at the ceremony to heart." Li looked a little confused. Li Wan continued, "I'm talking about when I said you disappointed me." So, that's what she meant. It seems this girl hasn't turned completely cold, even after growing up. Li took a deep breath and said, "I don't care in the slightest." Li Wan became excited. "Really? That's great. Aren't you a bit resentful?" Li was a little puzzled. What was that supposed to mean? Li Ruiz added, "I heard that your aunt is your teacher and that you even entered the treasure pavilion." Li was about to answer when a loud voice boomed from above. "Silence, class assignments will now be made. The students, whose names are called, must form 5 lines in front of the instructors." The students became nervous, fearing they would be assigned to bad classes. Li understood their reaction. The training lasted 3 years, and being in a good class was vital. Each grade had 5 classes, and the most talented students went to the highest ones. Li Ron was assigned as expected to class 1. Then came Li. He received the notification with a somewhat complex expression. Then he smiled calmly. Although he knew they would single him out, he didn't expect them to start with tricks so soon. He was assigned to class 5, known as the dump, where they placed untalented students who were about to be recommended for withdrawal. The direct descendants of the Li family were assigned. According to the results of the naming ceremony, and the ones who evaluated them were the Grand Dame and the elders, although they considered this a setback for Li. Perhaps it was a blessing in disguise, as it would save him a lot of trouble. An instructor told him to follow, as Class 5 was on the other side. On the way, Lee saw Lu Fan. Lirwan was furious about Lee's assignment. She believed it was an injustice and that she should complain immediately, but Lee was completely indifferent. What mattered now was whether he would manage to graduate from Class 5. The students there were, downcast with no fighting spirit. Then someone approached Lee. "You're the youngest son of the family, right?" Lee nodded. The other continued, "I wanted to greet you. Hello, my name is Hinan. I'm the son of a blacksmith employed by the Lee family. It's an honor to be in the same class as the young master." Lee was surprised. "Hinan, I don't remember hearing that name in my past life." Lee said indifferently, "Why me?" Hinan scratched his head. "Because you're the center of attention. I've always wanted to meet you." He didn't seem to be lying. Lee asked, "Your name is Hinan, right? What do you think about being in Class 5? Hinan replied, "They might think my current skills are only good for Class 5, but no one knows what the future holds." Lee was surprised and then smiled calmly. "You pass." The instructor for Class 5 was named Li Jing-ao. He told them that since there were new students, there would be no training that day. Everyone had to introduce themselves. Li Jing-ao was brimming with energy and enthusiasm. In his past life, he had even given Lee private tutoring when he couldn't keep up. Then he asked Karina to explain some precautions. "Hello?" Karina scratched his head. "Hello, I'm Karina, although I'm a bit shy. I've repeated 2 years and have been the class monitor during that time. You've all been standing for a long time. You must be tired. If you want to sit, go ahead and sit. Then we'll choose the monitor, even though we're students. We are also assigned tasks, so the monitor acts like a squad leader aside from the instructor who handles training. Everything else is managed by the monitor." Someone raised their hand. "How is the monitor chosen?" Kurena answered, "Although I don't know how they do it. In other classes in ours, it's done by a vote. After some light training will begin. This is to test everyone's strength. So please don't use magic. There will be short breaks after each duel." At that moment, Lee intervened. "Are you kidding me?" Quidena said nervously, "Young Master Lee, are you dissatisfied with what I said?" Lee replied coldly, "I'm dissatisfied with everything you've done. Get serious. This is the martial veneration family if you want to play at being students. Don't join a military academy, go to a regular safe school instead." Quidena retorted, "What you're saying is too much. I just wanted to resolve things peacefully." Lee stabbed his wooden sword into the sand and declared loudly, "I know you can't understand my words. Everyone come at me one by one. I will defeat every single one of you." Moments later, Lee had already defeated everyone except for Quidena. Quidena down below was completely shocked. Lee on the platform looked at him. "There's only one left, get up here." During the exchange, Quidena couldn't understand why Lee had to be so absolute. This was clearly a battle with no reward, just a student practice session. Even Lee was so exhausted he could barely attack. However, Quidena knew deep down why Lee was doing it. He himself used to be just as fierce, just as eager to win. "I thought I had matured, that I had learned to accept reality. But now I want to win. I desperately want to win." However, Lee sent his wooden sword flying with a single blow. Quidena clutched his wrist and cried out in pain. Lee sighed and said, "Take him to the infirmary." But Quidena roared, "It's not over yet." He picked up his weapon and desperately attacked Lee. Lee noticed that Quidena was using his left hand. He had broken his right one. His expression was different too. Lee deflected his sword and said calmly, "No, it's over now." Then he struck him in the abdomen with his sword. Quidena fell completely defeated. "Take him away. I treat every second like an hour and every hour like a year. Everyone knows that giving in a little would make life more comfortable, but if you don't fight every single moment, in the end, they'll take everything from you to protect what I have. I will fight to the death even if I only have one breath left. Have any of you ever lived like that? This is real combat." Moments later, Liang Hao approached Lee and accused him, "You went too far. 4 boys have fractures and 3 have internal injuries." Lee replied, "If they want to survive in the martial veneration family, they must endure such injuries." Liang Hao retorted, "All these kids have their own struggles." Lee said coldly, "Instructor Li Han Dao, the students have already understood. Do I need to explain it to the instructor as well? People like you are rare in this family. You're a good person, but those kids are members of the martial generation. If they go down the wrong path, you must correct them, even if it means playing the villain in front of them. Do what you have to do." The next day, upon arriving at the training grounds, although Lee noticed angry and contemptuous glares, no one avoided his gaze. If they were still as defeated as the day before, then there would be no hope. Then a voice sounded from behind Lee, "You've arrived, young master." It was Quidena. After greeting each other, Quidena asked, "Can I ask you a question?" Lee nodded. Quidena said seriously, "How can I become as strong as you, young master?" Lee indicated that he wasn't at the level to teach others yet. "But your eyes are good. Perhaps it's your intuition. Hey, yesterday you dodged my feints 3 times in a row. You can take advantage of that. I think you lean more towards technique than strength. If you give it your all with what you already have, one day you will reap the results." Quidena felt as if he understood. Just then a voice said, "Hey, I guess you understand how I feel." As for training, don't say again that I don't know what effort is. I came to see you because I don't want to be lectured anymore. Li smiled with satisfaction. Everyone has changed. Moments later, the coach gathered the students. Li Qinggao looked at his injured students. They all looked exhausted, and the atmosphere had changed. Yesterday they were relaxed, but now everyone was tense because of a single person. I was planning to evaluate your basic skills today, but given your current state, he clenched his fist. It doesn't matter. We will continue with the basic tests. 10 hours of continuous high-intensity training. Even Li was tired, but he knew he couldn't rest. The students commented that the coach had changed. The previous one would let them rest when he saw them injured. Li stepped onto the podium and said, I don't need to introduce myself, do I? Hello, I am the monitor for Class 5. Yesterday, Serena said that unless the coach says otherwise, everything is decided by the monitor. My training is very tough. Those who are willing follow me. I won't force the weak who don't want to. Someone below muttered, how arrogant. Li slammed the ground and said calmly, if you're not convinced, you can challenge me whenever you want. If you defeat me, I will give you the position of monitor. Now let's begin the training. Fight the person next to you. In the end, only 6 people lasted until the end. The rest gave up halfway. Li told them that was enough for today. They could go home. After Li left, someone complained, we've suffered so much because of that illegitimate bastard. Another added, it's true, I hate him too. What's the point of this? I don't want to hear it anymore. Serena interrupted them. Stop talking. I'm disappointed in myself, and the young master must be exhausted too. They tried to convince Serena we were fine last year. Why don't you stop following him too? Serena said with regret. It's precisely because of that attitude that I fell behind. If I don't change, this time I will have become a complete loser. So I want to change, even if it means breaking myself into pieces. It's not that the young master is forcing me. I want to push myself. This is truly the last time, so everyone let's get fired up. Don't be rebellious or play dumb. Meanwhile, Li was studying magic with his aunt, concentrating magical power in his hands. But every time he tried to process it, it would dissipate. Li Qinggao was on the verge of madness. He didn't expect that. Problems would arise upon entering the 3-star level. Li also sighed. If only there were books on how the ancients used magical power. The memories of Wu Jin were useful, but he couldn't read the next segment. Although his gains in the treasure pavilion were considerable long ago, there existed a terrifying monster, shrouded in darkness, which not even the bravest warriors in the country could defeat. However, a hero managed to seal it. The king praised his merits and granted him lands. The hero, moved by the king's grace, forged the holy sword named Wu Jin. The memories of Wu Jin continued to be of great help to Li. Li Jinhua praised him, but you are progressing entirely on your own. That's miraculous. I believe you will definitely overcome this problem. Li asked what it meant to reach the 3-star level, and Li Jinhua replied that it would allow him to use Yi techniques and enhancement arts, although there was still a long way to go before he could master them. Then she asked how things were going in his training class, as she saw he was tired and if he needed her help. Li replied that she should just wait and see that he wouldn't disappoint her. The next day, Li was left speechless upon hearing his aunt tell him to trust her knowledge. He already had a bad feeling. From the front, Li Jinghua announced, today we will have a special magic class taught by Elder Li Jinghua from the Council of Elders. A round of applause for her. Li Jinghua, somewhat embarrassed, commented, oh, this is a bit embarrassing. I don't like to drag things out. Let's begin the class. As he watched, Li noticed that Li Jinghua's teaching level had improved quite a bit. After a long theoretical lesson, she clapped and said that the boring part was over. And now for the interesting part, she would teach her research on how to enhance magic. Li Jinghao looked confused. Wasn't the class supposed to end there? But Li Jinghua indicated that it was not. That this was just the beginning and that everyone should sit up straight, as she would only demonstrate it once. Then she approached Li from behind and he asked what she was doing. She calmly replied that since the children of the direct bloodline received special support, she had to do the same for him. Li thanked her, and after she completed the technique, she explained theoretically. This will double your magical power, isn't that wonderful? Li nodded and replied that it was. Moments later, Yao clapped and announced that they would use these magical techniques in duels, choosing their partners. Karen approached Li and asked to be his opponent, assuring him she would show no mercy. Li gladly accepted. That's just what I want, bring it on. Seeing how Li was pressuring the former class leader to fight, even Li Jinghua sighed. He was too ruthless. Then, she heard some students muttering, I don't like that illegitimate son. Even though they look down on him for his background, he's different. His physical attributes are much better than ours. He's naturally stronger. Another added, yeah, we also work really hard, but he acts like we don't understand anything. Hearing this, Li Jinghua interrupted them. Were you talking about my student? The two of them bowed to apologize, but she said coldly, what do you understand? How dare you say that about that boy? Then a voice replied, it's not just us who know nothing. Isn't the young master the same? We also work hard, and he just insults us as if our efforts are useless. Since we grew up in different environments, it's normal for there to be a gap. Li Jinghua replied calmly, It seems you really don't understand anything, but maybe not knowing is a good thing. If you knew how different Lee is from you, you would realize that your current lives are nothing more than child's play. He now wasn't convinced he's just an illegitimate son. What could be so different? He decided to see for himself. He once again and Neopin followed Lee after training. They saw him go into the research institute and not come out for a long time. Neopin, crouching, yawned and said, "Come on, let's go home. We trained a lot today and I'm sleepy." Once again agreed, but just as they were leaving, Lee came out. He now thought he would finally go home now. But Lee went to the exclusive training ground for the direct descendants of the venerable Marshall family. Hearing the sounds of training inside, they were surprised. Neopin commented, "That's the illegitimate son training, not the young master. That's incredible, let's stop here." What he said was right, but Hinao stubbornly said, "I also train on my own, we're no different." Neopin and the others were speechless and said they were leaving. Hinao was still convinced that he was no different from Lee. He had to prove it. When Lee finally came out of the training ground, a voice asked who was there. It was a patrolling guard. Seeing Hinao's clothes, he said, "Ah, a student." Although young Master Lee is usually around at this time, I didn't expect him to bring a companion. A nervous Hinao replied that they had urgent business. The guard shone his flashlight and said, "This is a violation of school rules. Go back immediately." Hinao nodded hastily. It was already 2 in the morning, but the light in Lee's room was still on. Hinao reluctantly left at 5 in the morning. He arrived at the training grounds, but Lee was already there before him, looking exhausted. Even though he was of a direct bloodline and had great magical support, was it really normal for a 13 or 14-year-old to sleep only 3 or 4 hours a day? He now reflected, "What's my life like? When I get home, I rest, watch TV, play games, and even though I also train in private, I still sleep well and have fun." He asked Lee, "Aren't you tired?" Lee replied coldly, "I assume you're one of the people who followed me." Hinao nodded. "Yes, because you're of a direct bloodline and naturally different from the rest of us." Lee retorted, "I've lived this way since I was a kid. Of course I'm tired when I can only sleep for a few hours." Embarrassed, Hinao asked why he pushed himself so hard. Lee stood up, patted him on the shoulder and said, "You should know why." In that moment, Hinao finally understood how much separated him from Lee. Meanwhile, the patriarch of the Lee family, Texing, was practicing his swordsmanship on the training grounds. Butler Kui informed him that the documents he had requested were ready and asked with some concern, "Aren't the secret chambers on the 7th and 8th floors too dangerous for the students?" Lee Texing replied, "We can stockpile weapons and food, but talent doesn't work that way. It doesn't just appear on its own. We must forge people who can survive." The butler nodded in understanding, and then informed him of Lee's situation. Lee Texing commented with satisfaction, "His eyes have been different since he was a child. He has a sharp gaze that desires to reclaim everything but convincing, and leading others are two very different things. We will modify this test." Juan is also in that group, so I expect them to increase the difficulty. It's time to see if he truly has the potential to be a leader. And well, that's all for this one. Don't forget to subscribe and comment so you don't miss future updates. Without further ado, thanks for watching.